Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Onyx. On today's episode, I am joined by Mr. Donnie Vincent. Donnie is someone that I've been wanting to have on from the moment I started this podcast. He's one of my top guys that I had written down as far as like this is like a hit list of people I'd love to interview, and it was awesome to be able to have that chance to get to talk with him, and just a super good guy, and just very nice, and is an amazing storyteller. So this episode we'll dive into just Donnie's background, hunting the North Country and why he chooses to do so, and just, you know, his decision on going into and choosing a place to hunt, immersing yourself in the environment, training for those situations, and really just doing mentally challenging things and being present in today's world. So I can't wait for everyone to get to listen to this episode with Donnie. But first, the East Meets West Hunt podcast is brought to you by Onyx, and the Onyx Hunt app is your premier GPS hunting app that turns your phone into a working GPS. And so one of the features that I've been using a lot recently in the last week or so, since the snow's been melting, I've been out in the woods doing some scouting, and I'm using the tracking feature to be able to, I turn it on, tells me how far I go, and also shows a line of where I went. And if you're trying to pick up sheds, it's really helpful to see as you're gridding an area, or you're checking out, going through, or even walking a hillside, making sure you didn't miss a bench as you're scouting. And it's really helpful. And for me, I actually was I picked up a shed on Saturday, and I set it down, take a little break, have a snack, and left. And I was about 3/4 of a mile away before I realized I forgot it. Well, I did a big loop, and how I remembered where it was is you could see where I had stopped in my track, and I kind of moved around a little bit so you could see that area, that dot, and I went back and ended up finding it. So just a funny story by using the tracking feature. But anyways, if you want to check out the Onyx Hunt app for yourself, head over to onyxmaps.com and use the coupon code EMW to save 20%. And Tethered is a company founded on the principles of educating the hunting community on saddle hunting. So while they're creating the most innovative, lightweight, safe products for saddle hunting, they're also teaching people a ton on saddle hunting through the Teach and Train tour, the content they put online. And I'm currently using the Phantom saddle system and Predator platform for all of my mobile hunts. To learn more about Tethered and saddle hunting, head over to tetherednation.com. Maven is building the highest quality optics at half of the price of their competitors through their direct-to-consumer business model. They want to create the best optics for the job, period. Their products are backed with a lifetime no-fault warranty and an incredible customer experience. And Donnie, who I have on today's episode, is a big fan of Maven Optics as well. And they're an incredible company, as you heard on the last podcast I did with Cade, and really putting out some good products. So if you want to check that out, head over to mavenbuilt.com and use the coupon code EastMeetsWest-gift for a free gift with any full price optics order. And lastly, Spartan Forge. So hunters require an accurate forecast for the best hunting days and best hunting spots to save time on scouting and executing the hunts. Well, the Spartan Forge outfitter utilizes years of military background and machine learning to pull from millions of data points to accurately predict that deer movement, including GPS data, 30 years of weather, academic, and state research. So they're using science rather than someone's opinion to help you figure out the movement in your hunting area. I have a pretty cool podcast with Bill from Spartan Forge and Johnny Stewart coming out probably next week. So be looking for that to have some more background on the company and, well, just hunting stories. But for now, if you want to head over to SpartanForge.ai, you can use the code EastMeetsWest to save 25% off of the outfitter. All right, so on today's Mountain Buck Story of the Week, or otherwise known as Mountain Buck Monday over on social media, the story comes from Richard Tribend. And Richard, I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. I was going off your social media handle, so hopefully I got that right. And Rich's story is, I made it up to camp the day before the opening day of the Pennsylvania gun season. I got deep into a large piece of Pennsylvania public ground the day before to check some areas I e-scouted on Onyx and found the perfect bench working across a steep hillside just off of the creek bottom. I still hunted my way into the location the next morning and bumped some does and decided to sit down and take an early lunch. Not a minute later, I heard a branch crack and caught movement coming from an old clear cut heading towards the bench I was overlooking. The buck stepped out at 60 yards when I settled in and placed a fatal shot. Not having any cell service led to one heavy pack out a little over 4 miles in. This is my personal best whitetail, and to take it from a camp that me and my friends have been enjoying since high school just makes it that much better. And I love that story. It hits home with the camp aspect and being able to go in and just get it done off the ground during the Pennsylvania gun season. Just a really great buck too. So if you head over to social media, the East Meets West Hunt Instagram page or East Meets West Outdoors on Facebook, you can check out the photo of Richard's buck. It's pretty awesome. So send in your story. I'd love to feature it on a Mountain Buck Monday or Mountain Buck Story of the Week. And so up until now, I haven't been able to scout a whole lot this winter and spring. We got so much snow and ice that I haven't even been able to drive into my spots. The roads have been so bad, not taken care of as they normally are. But this year just seemed like we got some more snow and ice later. And so this past week, I got out a couple days after work, but this weekend I really got to get in and put some miles in. On Saturday, I put in 10 miles hiking around a spot that I'd hunted this past year and just really trying to learn more of the land. It was my first year hunting it last year, so I was just trying to get in and try to figure out where some of these bucks are bedded, where they're coming from, and just learning more. And there was still a decent amount of snow there. I picked up one old shed that looked like it was an artifact. I mean, it was actually buried into the ground up until only about 2 inches of the G2, and a piece of the brow tine was sticking out, and it was frozen into the ground. So I got that and just found some really good spots, put together some videos that eventually I'll get up on YouTube. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then on Sunday, I went into a spot I'd never hunted, but scouted quite a bit. And it's funny, if you watch the long haul film that I put out last month, there was a section in there where I was talking about scouting on Sunday, and I mentioned this creek bottom spot that I'd never hunted, but I believed it would be a really good midday cruising area. Well, I should have took my own advice and hunted it that week, because I just pulled the trail camera that was soaking in there, and I had this just absolutely incredible buck move through there 3 days in a row in daylight, and one of the times was a little after 10 a.m. and the other time was at 12:43 p.m. So just goes to show, I mean, yeah, I guess I should have put the time in there rather than just talking about it. So it's only so many spots that you can hunt, and just learning from that, those trail camera photos is just crucial information. I'm really looking forward to learning more about this piece and scouting it some more. And I picked up one small fresh shed on the way out. So this next month I'll be putting on a lot of miles in the woods, learning old spots, checking out new areas, and just trying to learn and continually learn. Every year I learn more, and I'm fascinated by it. So anyways, we will get into this episode with Mr. Donnie Vincent. Enjoy. Even that camera soak, and actually even had some good late season photos in daylight coming to feed in that cut. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. And now with the warmer weather coming in this week, I plan to be in the woods a lot more and to get to check that out. And I also have some really good guests coming up on the podcast. This week I'm recording with Brian Barney, who's a host of the Eastman's Elevated podcast, as well as Donnie Vincent, and then Bill Thompson from Spartan Forge. So big lineup this week to record podcasting and to release in the coming weeks. It's been a dream of mine to be able to talk with Donnie Vincent, as he was one of the ones that originally motivated me to want to start adventure hunting. So I'm really, really excited to get to talk with him this week and then be able to share it with everybody else. But anyways, I want to thank everyone for listening and checking out the podcast here. If you do like it, I would love if you went over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to it and give a rating and a review. That helps out a ton. And I hope everyone has a great week. Enjoy this podcast with Cade Mastis of Maven. All right, we're live. Donnie Vincent, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm good, man. I'm good. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Well, before I even get into talking you through intro and stuff here, but one thing I wanted to say first off is I wanted to thank you because you were one of two people that really inspired me to start adventure hunting years ago. When I first watched the Rivers Divide film and then just started looking into your videos. I think it was right when you released Who We Are. It was like 2016 is that winter is when I started planning my first elk hunt that year and it's really just turned into something where now I'm trying to help others plan it and started doing films and everything that was like, so I just wanted to thank you first and foremost for being that inspiration for me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, it's, that's not really why I set out to do this stuff, but it's just a natural kind of evolution. And I've been helping friends of mine for years. Because they would ask me, I'd go spend 20 days in Alaska by myself and hunt caribou and moose and black bears and I'd come home and they'd kind of sensationalize the experience. They'd want to know all these grand tales, and I certainly had grand tales to tell, but I wanted to almost compartmentalize that stuff and kind of push it off the side and tell them that they could do this. Like this isn't superhero stuff. This is, you certainly have to have a strong mind, but I wanted to tell them stories, but I wanted to get them in the mindset that they could do it themselves.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome, and I know I'm not the only one that is probably taking that route from seeing your stuff and everything. It was kind of the beginning of that different type of hunting content that was being put out there, and I thought that was cool. And one of the things I said in the intro before we started recording here was I said, having you on here, I know you've been on some other podcasts and stuff before, and I wanted to take it a little bit of a different turn and talk about some stories and go through things. But with that being said, you still got to give a little bit of a background on yourself and who you are and also your business that you've created.
Yeah. So the long and short of it is I'm in love with wildlife. I love landscapes. I love wild animals. I love being outside. I love the weather. From songbirds to amphibians, reptiles, large mammals, hunting, bird watching, just being outside shooting my bow or just taking the dogs for a walk. I'm just completely captivated by being outside. And so, out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't a very successful high school student. I got along with all of my teachers. I think they were all quietly rooting for me, I hope. But I just kind of kept trying to find my way into working with wildlife and working with animals. And I worked in a couple of veterinary offices and I ended up going to the University of Minnesota and learning about wildlife biology and fisheries biology, and then ended up working as a research scientist for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the University of Minnesota itself, the Bell Museum of Natural History, which somehow turned into, I had this infatuation, this intrinsic love with Alaska from reading a bunch of books when I was a kid, and I really wanted to get outside and see really wild places, not just hunt in my backyard, which I also wanted to do, but I wanted to see caribou and grizzly bears and moose. And so I started hunting in Alaska, which led to me telling stories to people and getting into storytelling, which led to people asking more about my hunts, which led to me actually taking a camera along and documenting my story and documenting my experience to share with people that I was having difficulties articulating it to at home, which led to actually working with gentlemen that knew how to use a camera and really were talented. And I became the storyteller, and they helped me tell the story. And then we formed in 2011 or 2012, we formed Sicmanta, which is our production house. And so we do a bunch of commercial work for companies like Benelli, Shields, Mossberg, True Velocity, Maven Optics, to doing our adventure films, things that you'll find under my name, Terra Nova, The Rivers Divide, The Other Side, and Winds of Adak so far. And we have, man alive, if people knew how much content I had filmed and how much I have that I'm sitting on top of to produce and bring out, like, I mean, we could, if we had the time, we could produce 10 more films.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I know when you released The Other Side, how many years of filming did that was involved in that? I mean, you could almost see it throughout the years of the different hunts. I mean, you could.
Oh yeah, it was six plus years from Northwest Alaska in the spring for grizzlies, spring coastal hunts on Vancouver Island for black bears, fall coastal hunts on Vancouver Island for black bears, multiple brown bear hunts on the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. I mean, it was years and years and years, and a lot of people would see these. I even had a couple of industry guys kind of get down on me. People would come away from these projects, maybe if without a bear or without something really kind of bookmarking the beginning and ends of those stories, with feeling that they just spent a bunch of money and went to an amazing place and kind of came home with nothing. But that's the opposite of how I see it. I see it as an individual layer of what is, when I just see it as a richness, and that richness it just continues to grow as we film and go to places, and just gives us more to bite our teeth into.
Yeah, no, I think it's very well received, and the one thing I will say is I was kind of waiting for the next thing to come out. It felt like there was, the gap in there, and I understand.
It's a long time.
I understand why 100%. It was just like, for me as a viewer, and I feel like I don't take in a ton of hunting media, especially because I produce a lot of it from my own standpoint, so I'm always busy doing that. But I was really looking forward to. I was like, when are you going to come out with something? And then once you did, and then, I mean, the Winds of Adak wasn't too far behind. What was it, another year or so?
Yeah, it was basically a year. So we did the Rivers Divide, and then we did Terra Nova the very next year. Then we had a pretty big hiatus, then The Other Side, and there's maybe one year off, or 3/4 of a year, and then the Winds of Adak. And we're slotting our calendars right now to produce another one this year. So.
Oh, okay. Are you able to say what that one's going to be, or is that still a secret?
Yeah, I think we want to do something entirely different. So I think this is going to be a piece about Australia.
Interesting.
And I've spent now like 5 weeks or 6 weeks in Australia with a very good friend. I would consider him one of my very best friends, Nick Joyce, who is a native Australian. He is maybe one of the most soulful men I've ever had the privilege of hunting with. I paused there because I've hunted with some really fantastic people. But Nick started inviting me to Australia years ago, and I would kind of just write it off. He'd invite me to come and hunt Asiatic water buffalo, and I would write it off. And he'd email me again. I get invited on a lot of hunts, and 99.9% of them I say no, thank you. But he just kept trying. And then finally I said, let's hop on a phone call. And we talked, and I could tell that he loved the buffalo, and I could tell that he loved Australia, the snakes, the lizard, the fish, the crocodiles, as much as I would had I been able to get there or when I was able to get there. And that's number one for me. Like if somebody wants me to come and hunt with them, show me how much you love the environment, show me how much you love the animals, and show me how much you love immersing yourself into it. And that's what's going to get me, to kind of pop on it. And that kid he's got a lot going on between his ears, and he's a really good dude. He's about as Aboriginal and bush as they get, yet he's a handsome young lad. And so we've had a lot of good adventures, and I think we have a really cool film that we can put together for Australia.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm definitely looking forward to that. So the one thing I wanted to kind of transition to here is one of the things I noticed with you particularly is you tend to hunt the North Country versus the lower 48 more so. And can you kind of explain why that is?
You mean like Northern Canada and Alaska?
Yeah. Yep.
I just like getting away from people. There's some wild country in the lower 48, and I've had some really wild hunts. Even close to home, I've had some really wild hunts in North Dakota, but basically just want to escape. Like the further I go, the smaller the airplanes get. I'm going to have this opportunity to get out of the airplane, throw my bag on the ground, take my bow out, watch that airplane take off, and just fall into silence. I mean, for the most part, I don't even see other airplanes. I don't see other hunters. I just can hike as far as I want any one direction and really not run into people. And that's what I chase. That's what I'm chasing. And
I can relate to that. This past year was the first year I went to Alaska to hunt. I had visited and I decided to do a caribou hunt. And what I ended up finding out when I was with the air charter that was flying us in, they asked if I knew you, and apparently you had flown with them as well. And
who was it?
Ram Aviation.
Oh yeah, with Brian.
Yeah, Brian. Yeah, so
I know Brian. I've flown with Brian a bunch.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. Man, a few words, and just and so we flew with him. Me and one of my best buddies, and that from growing up, and then my film producer and videographer, cinematographer, and we all went in there. And after that hunt, I was like, I don't know how it's tough to try to plan something I love Western hunting in the United States, but the people aspect, it just, I don't know, it degraded that a little bit from the experience that I had up there where we got dropped off and I never saw another person. Every once in a while you see a plane fly over, and that was it. And the Arctic, the North Slope of the Brooks Range was just incredible. It was such an incredible experience.
How was your hunt?
It was great. I mean, it was funny because, I said Brian's a man of few words, but so we were flying in and we took one plane in, and it was a Cessna 180, I think is the plane. So we had 4 of us in there, including him. And then we puddle jumped in with one of the smaller super. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And he came back and he was like, "Hey, we couldn't get to your spot. The weather was starting to get bad. So we dropped your first guy off at one of the spots. So we're going to take you in." And there's this little creek bottom, this little sandbar, rock bar, and we're coming into it. And I'm like, how are we going to land a plane on this spot? And I trusted him. He's obviously been doing it forever.
He's very talented.
He is, and he did it perfectly. I mean, it was smoother than some commercial flights I had been on. Yeah. And we got in, and he said to us, we're like, "Oh, have you been, seeing any caribou like flying over?" He's like, "Well, not really right here." He's like, "But I figured you guys look like you're in good shape. I'd recommend hiking up over that mountain there. It's about," he's like, "that's about, 2 miles from here, but I'd recommend going that way." And so we're like, kind of in our head, and he just left, we're like, are we going to see anything? What that did though was so cool, because that on the first day, like the first day we flew in, you obviously can't go anywhere as far as you can't hunt. So we had to wait, and we got camp set up and just kind of enjoyed it. And the first morning we saw 2 grizzly bears up on that saddle and watched them through the spotters for a while. And then some caribou were way up on the top of this ridge, and we put a stalk on them, but a really terrible storm blew in ended up moving them off of this cliff face, this open hillside they were on, and we ended up doing this big like 9 or 10 mile loop, and it was the most beautiful hike that I'd ever been on. And I ended up missing a bowl. It was about 4.5 miles from camp, and it ended up being kind of a blessing from that side of it. It was quite a bit of ways, but anyways, we got to continue to hunt more, and throughout we ended up finding this herd right as the fog lifted in the morning, coming down the valley, and put a stalk on it, and both me and my buddy doubled up on 2 beautiful bulls. I mean, it just happened so fast, and it was awesome to be able to pack that meat back to camp. And we were sitting in camp, and this Arctic fox came right up to us at camp, and just like looked like you never saw anybody before. And it was just, I don't know, it was incredible.
Oh yeah. You've described something that I've experienced. I mean, I've only flown with Brian out of Kotzebue once so far, but I've flown with him on the Alaska Peninsula 4 or 5 times, something like that. But I'm going to continue to fly with him. I'm not going with him this fall, but after this, I plan on basically going with him every fall and just hunting with him. I actually might. I just texted him yesterday because I want to get up in that country this summer and go up there and just breathe a little bit, hike around a little bit, but I have another caribou and moose hunt booked in Alaska this year, so I can't kill a caribou with him because then I'm tagged out for this other herd. So I just want to see some new country, but yeah, he's an awesome dude, man. Were you guys rifle hunting or bow hunting?
We were rifle hunting.
Oh, yep. Smart. Good.
Yep. Yeah. It's funny. I actually was planning on taking a bow until about 3 weeks before the hunt. And, I thought it through, and I typically bow hunt, but I'm never opposed to rifle hunting. I love rifle hunting, but I was like, for me, that doesn't change the experience of this hunt, whether I have a bow or a rifle. And I was like, and I also want to increase my odds of success. And, Brian had said to us, he's like, hey, depending on where I drop you off, it might be difficult to stalk with a bow. And it ended up being, we were in the mountains essentially. So I think we could have done it with a bow, but it was, so we did end up doing it with a rifle, and it was pretty awesome to be able to see that. And even seeing grizzly bears, which that was the first time that I'd ever been on a hunt in an area that had grizzlies, and to be able to see them, and then one morning wake up and there was tracks through camp, and it was just, I don't know, it was something crazy.
Yeah, I love it there. That's why I go there, man, is to have the freedom and to see the animals behaving like animals. And I used to kind of take it for granted, I guess, and not anymore. Like years ago, you used to be able to hunt moose out of Kotzebue with just an over-the-counter tag, and they had, I can't even tell you how many times I've been in Kotzebue bringing in my caribou, and guys are right next to me bringing in these absolutely like 70-inch bull moose. And I always told myself like it was never going to go away. And I'd always say like, okay, next year I'll do a moose hunt. But I just kept doing caribou just because it was a little bit cheaper, and I was in college and I could afford it a little bit better. And it was tricky for me to find guys to go with. So like I can handle a caribou, but I was worried about handling a moose by myself back then. And now it's, now there's no moose hunting there.
Yeah. So why do they stop it?
It's a lot of, there's a couple of different reasons, and I don't want to pretend like I know all the variables, but I think there's a lot of native pressure from the Inuit people of Kotzebue to kind of shut down non-residents from coming in there and shooting moose. And I think there's a lot of, like I said, I think there's a lot of politics around it. And there used to be a lot of moose in that area. I don't know what the moose population is now. I hunted it not that long ago, a few years ago, the year before we came out with Who We Are, and I saw tons of moose, tons and tons of moose, tons of bulls, tons of cows. So, I think it's more political than it is anything else, but U.S. Fish and Wildlife is trying to preserve the relationship with the native people there, and rightfully so, as they should. But yeah, I think there's a lot of pressures that are uncommon and unique.
Yeah. So why, I mean, I know you said about the cost a little bit, but was there anything else as far as caribou that kept drawing you back to hunting them specifically?
You mean like over elk, or just in
general, like going back to Alaska, like why were you choosing caribou for the most part?
Yeah, it's just watching them move, watching the herds come through the mountains, and all of their antlers were so vastly different. You could see one with just massive tops and one with massive fronts, and occasionally you'd get one with them all. But I just loved camping there and seeing the northern lights and watching, each day, like for instance, if you're elk hunting, you kind of hike into a basin, and I've only elk hunted a little bit, so I don't want to pretend like I know what I'm talking about, but you hike into a basin, you have bugling bulls. Of course, bulls can come in and bulls can go out, and you might have hunters coming in and hunters going out, but there's a lot going on. But like with caribou, very often you're seeing new herds every single day. You're seeing new animals every single day. Now the downfall is, I'm not calling to these bulls. They're not coming in rutting. We did kind of call in the bull that we killed in Terra Nova, that woodland caribou. We kind of grunted him in, but excuse me. But it's just the wild country, man. It's seeing grizzly bears, seeing wolves, sitting down at night next to your tent, listening to a stream run by, or waking up in the morning and having grizzly tracks. Right. I mean, I've slept on a couple of sandbars there without even a tent, nothing. And literally would wake up in the morning to big bear, a big grizzly bear, a big adult bear, literally circled me like 3 times at night and then walked off. And I didn't have a gun, and B, I didn't wake up at all. Like you'd think like, oh, I'm for sure going to wake up. No, this big girl or big boy, I think it was a big boar, walked around me 3 times on this sandbar. I mean, he walked within like 8 yards of me, and then he left. And he's probably like, what in the hell is this stinky thing laying on the sandbar? Yeah. That's that's why though, and seeing their white manes and it literally defines my life.
It is crazy how we never saw one bull that looked anything like another one. Every one, like the antlers, the bodies, the manes, like the one that I killed didn't have much for tops, but had big double shovels on the front and just giant fronts, big white mane, big body, old bull. And the one that my buddy Michael shot had big tops with splits on it and stuff, and not as much on the fronts. And his mane didn't have the white to it. It was more brown, and like it was really cool to see them kind of next to each. We didn't shoot them right next to each other, but just the differences in the two bulls was incredible. And yeah, it was caribou hunting it. When I first planned that, it was more of like, okay, this was my gateway into Alaska, and I was going to start, and then I was going to move on, another species and try. And then after I embraced myself into and had that hunt, I was like, I could go back for caribou every year and be completely satisfied. It was more about even the location for me too, like just being able to go to that place and for a reasonable price. Like you can't beat that.
No, it's an amazing place. It's it's one of my favorites.
So when you choose like the hunts that you're going to go on, do you look at it as more of a species specific or location, or a little bit of both? Like how are you choosing on these adventures that you want to go on?
For sure, both. I'll find animals, and then one of the things that I really like to kind of track down is mature animals. Right? Hunting younger class animals is not something that interests me all that much. I've nothing against it. I've lots of friends and colleagues that do it, and there's I think it's amazing, but I want to find wild places, and I want to find herds of animals, or the ability for individual animals to reach maturity. That just excites me to see all the different age classes in the area. I shouldn't say that I'm just looking for mature animals, but to go to an area that has all the age classes of animals, all the way from yearlings all the way up to elder class, cows and bulls, or bucks and does. That's really what I'm looking for. I want to see wild places. And I got caught with my hand in the cookie jar last year. I was up in Alaska. I did not have a very good hunt, which happens, but I kind of was talking to the pilot that I flew with last year, and he said, what is it that you want to accomplish? And I said, I was hunting moose and grizzly bears. And I said, I would just love to find an old mature bull moose in a really wild place. And that's important to me. And as much of like the location and the animals and the type of hunting. And he said, I think we can do it. He said, and I don't want to misspeak, but he basically said, like, sometimes we'll find older bulls in different areas and we'll kind of set in on them and camp on them. And then we'll sneak in and hunt those individual animals. And I said, I really don't want to do that. That's not for me. I'd rather float through an area or hike through an area or, basically trek through an area, old school manner, kind of like different scenery every day or different scenery every couple days and hunt big bulls that way. And by and large, when we've wrapped up, my biggest disappointment was I saw a lot of people, a ton of people. And the particular river that we were on, we felt as though people weren't going to be able to access it because it was the conditions were uncertain at best. But then as we trekked down into this lower part of the river, we realized that there was a gentleman that had accessed it with a jet boat, and an airboat. He had like an airplane engine on his boat, and lo and behold, right away we floated into this very wild area, and it was really cool. Beautiful. We saw some cool animals there. Nothing in the likes of mature moose, but right away we started seeing human tracks on all the sandbars. And that's not something that I'm generally used to, and so that wasn't a very good experience for me. But when I got back to base camp, there were several guys in camp with really big bulls, which I was stoked for them. I think that's awesome. But kind of when I was starting to, I kind of inquired with the pilot. I was like, man, like. It's an incredible bull, talking to him, and he's like, yeah, this is an incredible bull, but this particular bull was right next to a mining camp. And you kind of said you wanted to, and again, I wasn't complaining. He wasn't justifying, but he's like, you said you didn't want to see people and you wanted a wilderness experience. Well, this bull happened to be living right next to a mining camp. And so we had to drop hunters in on. So hunting for me is very much about intrinsic value as much as it is finding an elder class animal. And so, if I have to go through, it's difficult to say, but if I have to kind of cut corners or compromise my beliefs or kind of how I want to go through the situation to get a big mature animal, I really don't like to do that. And I kind of like it the hard way. And even though I'm doing it the hard way, that doesn't mean I'm all of a sudden going to pop on a younger animal or whatever, because it just doesn't. I'd much rather watch them and give them another year or two than to short stroke my hunt. So it's really weird. I have a lot of very high expectations in myself, and I try to find areas of the wilderness and of woods that enhance that. But saying that, Bo, if I'm hunting in Illinois or South Dakota or somewhere and I'm hunting on somebody's farm and I'm in a tree stand or on the ground right next to somebody's barn or I can see their home or whatever, that doesn't bother me at all because I'm hunting an animal that is kind of a woodland animal, right? Yep. When I hunt whitetails, I don't mean I have to go as far out, or muleys. Like if I was hunting muleys on open plains and I could see farm country in the distance, that doesn't bother me at all because that adds up to my head, adds up in my mind. But when I'm hunting Alaska Yukon moose, I don't want to be looking at a mining camp per se. Does that make sense? And I certainly don't want to be look at a a giant red airboat with a dragon painted on the side that says like dragonhunts.com, and you get my drift.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I definitely do. And I can relate to that. And it's like, for me, I mean, I get that way even with whitetails. Like, I feel like I could hunt a lot of places that have bigger animals and some stuff. And like, I love Pennsylvania from the standpoint of, I don't, in archery season, in rifle season, it gets quite a bit of pressure, but in archery season, I don't see anybody for the most part, and I can get away. And are my odds of success low? Yes, but there's that potential to see these old deer that just act like deer in these places, and I love that. Like, I have trouble trying to go somewhere else when I can explore different parts of Pennsylvania that have those things that I'm looking for in it. It makes me feel like I'm on an adventure style hunt somewhere in the Rocky Mountains or in Alaska or whatever. It's all a little bit different, but in my opinion, I like those type of environments more. I tried it when I used to live outside of Pittsburgh for a while and hunted some of those suburban type areas, and I guess I got a little bit used to it when I had the mindset that that's what it was, but I couldn't get full, like, I don't know, I couldn't get fully engulfed in it. It's the same thing too with, like, when I go on these hunts, I like to be able to get my mind in that frame where if I work a day job, so I work 7 to 4 at my job, and then I try to go hunt after work, which I do from time to time, but I have trouble switching my mind into that point to really enjoy and embrace that experience, and it's difficult to do that. And I know you're a big fan of long hunts. Like, when you go to places, you typically go for quite a while, right?
Yeah. I mean, typically, like if, for instance, if I'm flying out with Brian, like I don't want to be there any less than 14 days. Like, I just want to immerse myself, and I'll go to a couple different camps and really look things over and hike around and just kind of enjoy my time in the Arctic. But you start to really see things, the animals start to kind of bump back into their routines, and just by happenstance, you're in the country and you see, you'll watch a pack of wolves hunting, or you'll see a fantastic, this year when we were on that moose hunt, I had one of the best, our second to last night was one of the best nights of the Northern Lights that I've ever seen. I mean, it was freezing cold outside. So you wanted to kind of go in the teepee where there was a fire going and get in your sleeping bag and close your eyes. But it was like 2:00 in the morning and the whole sky was just, I mean, unbelievable green. And so, if you're only there for a few days, you miss this stuff, and I went on a moose hunt one time. It was out of Kotzebue. And it was an awesome place. It was a wild place. In fact, I have to give this landing strip details to Brian, because it was a very, very cool place. And I don't think he necessarily knows where it is, but I have to get him the landing strip. But it's I was there we were there for 23 days. And so, we saw packs of wolves hunting, we saw massive grizzly bears and huge bull moose. Like, I was watching this ridge and I'd see this, massive bull here and a massive bull here, and they grunt. And I'm watching them. They're like 6 miles from me. So I'm seeing them, like, I see this huge bull coming out of the trees. And then like 2 miles from me, I see another bull coming out of the trees. And I can see this one just like, whoa. And then I see the one, whoa. And I see them, they both walk over to individual trees and they start messing them up. And then, whoa. It took them like, 30, 40 minutes to kind of work into the same meadow. And I watched these two, I mean, they were both like 65, 68, 70-inch bulls come into this meadow, just rocking their antlers back and forth. And, they just kind of squared off and boom. And I watched those dudes fight brutally for like 30 minutes. I mean, there was mud flying. The whole field was torn up when they were done. And they did their thing. They fought brutally, and then they turned and went their separate ways. But, I watched that whole thing, and it was funny when the pilot picked us up. we got in and we're we look like I look right now. I mean, I look horrible. Just like, I look like Ted Kaczynski's brother, and so I'm getting in and I'm buckling in and this pilot goes, "Hey, do you see any bears?" I'm like, "Oh, we saw multiple black bears, beautiful, beautiful black bears eating berries." And I said, "We saw a couple of really big grizzlies, huge monster boars, a couple of sows with cubs." And he's, and he said, "Did you see any wolves?" And I said, "Yeah, we saw 3 packs of wolves. We got surrounded a couple of times. We got some awesome footage of them, And he's like, "Did you see any northern lights?" I'm like, "Oh, multiple nights we saw the northern lights." And it was cool, Bo, because when we landed, everything was green. The berries were plump. Like, it was summer. When we landed, it was summer. The alder leaves were green, and the aspen leaves were green, and it was summer. And then we watched it come into full bloom, like full peak colors. And then we watched everything turn brown and all the leaves fall off the trees. And, I can remember seeing the quaking aspen. Like, I could see the leaves so green and white, just kind of flickering in the wind. And then you see them when they're so golden that you can't possibly think that something that's dying could be so bright. And we saw these colors that just, awe-inspiring. You couldn't help but look around. And then a week later or 10 days later, you're seeing this brown crusted leaf laying in a puddle that's frozen over. And, we watched it go from summer to winter in 23 days. And we saw everything in between. The only thing we didn't see was a caribou, which there really aren't caribou in this area, but we saw massive bull moose. How we didn't kill one, because we didn't kill one on the trip. How we didn't kill one, I'll never understand it, because we came so close every day. And we could have killed. We got very, very picky because we were seeing very, very big bulls, and we were passing really big bulls. We were hunting a couple of particular bulls that we saw that were world class, but they'd give us the slip one day, and then the next day they'd show up with 10 cows. But anyway, the pilot asked us all of these questions, and then we told him everything we'd seen. And he just kind of looked at us and he said, people want to come here for 5, 6, 7, 8 days, and they want to see everything that you just described. He's like, but it's not going to happen. You have to come here for 14, 20, 21, 25, 30 days to watch the whole world kind of give itself up to you. And that's really why I started doing longer and longer hunts, even whitetails, right? Instead of hunting whitetails for 7 days, I want to hunt them for 14 days. I'd rather shoot and just hanging my hat on success. I'd rather kill 2 animals in a year, 3 animals in a year, and completely immerse myself into that hunt and that experience than to go antelope in Wyoming, mule deer in Montana, whitetails in Idaho, mountain lion here, turkeys here, like kind of hunting TV, if you will, or just how some guys start, I'd much rather bring myself to North Dakota and immerse myself in the sunrises and the sunsets, and then take myself to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and hunt divers on the big lake and really immerse myself. And then head down to Illinois and look for big whitetails, or up to Alaska, whatever it is,
Yeah. And that is so true too. Like when, I remember the first long hunt that I did. And when I say long hunt, it was 14 days. It was in Colorado in 2018, and started off backpack hunting with my dad, and we hunted for 7 days and never even saw an elk. I mean, it was dry conditions. They had moved down, so we completely relocated to a different area, got to see more country, and then he had to fly back, so he flew back. I met up with some other people, and we ended up taking horses back into this wilderness area about 9 miles deep. The horses packed our gear, and we walked next to it. And it was the first time I had ever hunted with pack animals, and that was interesting in its own. But when I got there, I remember it was, like you said, it was summer. I got there at the end of August, and when I left September 15th, 16th, 17th, whatever it was, everything was full, the aspens
on fire.
It was amazing. And it was the coolest experience. I didn't kill an elk on that trip at all.
Yeah.
And so then that led me to wanting to do more of these longer trips. And I have a certain amount of days I can take vacation from work. So I have to, plan around that. And so the next year I went to Idaho and we spent 14 days hunting there, and I ended up killing my bull on the first day of the trip, but I had my buddies with me that were still hunting. So, we took the meat back into the local butcher, and I had them keep it in the freezer there or in the fridge there for so long. And we just got to just see the whole entire thing and see the seasons change. And the same thing this year. I'm planning on going to Colorado to hunt mule deer in the high country on a backpack hunt, and we want to do that for a long period of time. And rather than, I want to see so many places. It's like it's tough to, but at the same time, I get anxious if I have to jump around and do those type of things, and that's where, to me, it's important to like you said, fully embracing that. And I think one of the things I heard you say somewhere down along the line is, when people go on hunts, a lot of the times they get there and they start getting anxious. And they feel like they need to kill something, or if it's starting to get down and they don't get to really enjoy the whole process. Right. And I've caught myself doing that before. And
of course we all have.
Yeah. And it's like to really get into that mindset and do it that way is, I don't know, that changed my whole experience when it comes to hunting, is by enjoying the whole season. I mean, in my whitetail season this past year, I started hunting them in October, and, on and off weekends, sometimes I had a week off from work, and then I didn't kill one until the first week of December. So I had 2 months and a week of hunting before I killed something. I wouldn't have changed that for the world, because I got to see everything. I got to see the early season, going to some of the food source. I got to see them rutting. I got to see chasing. Then I got to see more of the late season stuff, and it was really cool.
Yeah, and that's really, and you can experience this stuff. You really can. I tend to, you'll see me go one way and talk about the wilderness, and then I'll talk about how amazing your backyard is, and then I'll talk about, hunting someplace for 14 or 21 days, and then also having that mindset of finding it in hours, right? Finding it in hours, or finding it in days. And it's all really about your mindset. So you can, like if you have this super hectic schedule set up in the fall, I highly doubt that you're going to be able to kind of immerse yourself in these different areas. Like you're going to be running and gunning and with hunting, you're going into different camps. So it's kind of like there's always this kind of posturing when you get into the camp of like who's there and who's this new guy coming into camp. And there's always just kind of this dynamic, but like you spoke to, sometimes you get off work and you go for a quick hunt and you struggle to kind of shut work off. Well, that's also a talent. That's also a mindset that you can work on getting into. If you're going to grab a dozen decoys and you're going to go sit on your farm pond and try to kill a mallard for dinner, or a couple of blue-winged teals, or a wood duck in an afternoon hunt, like you can, there is the ability to, separate your mind and immerse yourself into this 2-hour hunt that you're going to dive into. In my life, I became very, very good at that, because accessing big country and accessing wild places was not something that I could do in high school. I had to drive to a duck hunt. I had to go walk. I used to walk these farm roads or fire roads in a wildlife refuge that was open for duck hunting when I was in high school. And, I'd get out of school and I'd grab my dog and I'd grab my shotgun and I'd go sneak down this fire road and jump these ponds and shoot, a couple of ducks here and there. And, man, those were big adventures. And each one took like 3 hours. And they were huge. And I loved them. And so that's also I don't want people to come away thinking that they have to hunt elk or caribou or moose or grizzly bears to kind of like go to a far off place. Like you can do this in your yard. You really can, whether it be fly fishing for little local rainbows or brookies or little browns. And you're like, you can go to another place. Like you can immerse yourself. It doesn't take very much or very long to really find adventure. And there's people that go on these massive hunts, myself included. I discovered this last year. I was guilty of it last year. I know guys that go on massive hunts, $100,000 hunts, if you will, big sheep hunts, moose hunts, caribou hunts, and they're never even present when they're there. They're worried about work. They're worried about family. They're worried about being successful. They're worried about their next hunt that's coming up in British Columbia in a week or 2 weeks, and they never really allow themselves to get there. So the big ticket hunts and the far off places aren't necessarily a guarantee that you're going to be able to swing your mind into the right place.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a very, very good point, and definitely something I can work on for some of my, after work ones. And I'm always trying to learn those types of things and learn how the mindset shift, because I've just learned so much with hunting. Like everything that happens, it's really anything in life. Your mindset determines how anything goes, and even if something's challenging or something is tougher than you imagined, the way you look at that and how you assess that in your own mind is how that outcome is going to be. It could I guess the outcome could look the same from the outside, but the way you experience that can be different depending on how your mindset is within it.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
And and I don't know. That's just something that it's an ever evolving thing, and I've learned from some of these adventure hunts that whether it's out west. When I started this podcast, I did it for two reasons. One was selfishly to be able to interview people to learn more about doing these adventure style hunts, and then two, I was like, with throwing a mic on, I could help others be able to do or at least give them the knowledge or the motivation to realize that it's possible to do that and go. But what I ended up learning when I started sharing some of my whitetail hunts in Pennsylvania, that's an adventure in its own, and it took a mindset shift. That was just something I did. I didn't think of it that way, and now I look at it a completely different way than I did even 5-6 years ago, and it is pretty cool to be able to do that. And depending on where you're at in your life and how much time you can dedicate to things, it definitely takes a different shift.
Oh yeah, it's big adventure. I can vividly recall when I started bow hunting, which was in my early years of college, literally setting out on a 53-acre piece of woods to hunt a doe or a large buck, but the opportunity of me seeing a large buck was probably not going to happen. So it was basically a doe hunt, and it was as captivating as anything I've ever done, still to this day. Sneaking into the woods, picking the areas that I was going to hunt, looking at the lay of the land, listening for the deer, seeing wild turkeys, bald eagles, black bears. Like it was fantastic.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate to that. So another thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So like when you're getting ready for these types of hunts, because I've learned that when you go on these longer hunts or just any adventure style hunt, one of the things that to keep in check, which is kind of what we've been talking about, is your mind and your body. I mean, they can get wore out quick. My first elk hunt, 4 days into it, my first backpack hunt, I was like going nuts in my head, and I was like, I never realized that I relied on this thing, my phone, before until I was, I took pride. I don't need that kind of stuff. It doesn't bother me until you don't have cell service for so many days, or you don't. And when you're new to it, that's a big deal, and how and not related to the cell phone, but when it comes to like any of these types of hunts that are difficult, whether it be on your mind, on your body, how are you getting prepared for that? Like say this time of year when maybe you're not going on as many adventures.
Sure. Well, the body is a little bit easier to control than the mind for me. So, the body boils down to kind of nuts and bolts for me. It's pushing weights in the gym, pretty heavy weights, not heavy in the regards of like powerlifting, but definitely lifting heavy weights and going through a complex, comprehensive full body workout. I do a full body workout, for lack of a better schedule. I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, essentially. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, essentially, I'll find something to do, whether that be mountain biking or snowshoeing or, whatever it is, doing some sort of cross training, which I also end up doing on the days that I'm lifting weights. Particularly in the wintertime, late winter, early spring, it's not uncommon for me to throw on a 45-pound Raptor weight vest and snowshoe several miles every night with, just taking my dogs out, whether it be honestly 20 below zero or 20 above. And so it's just kind of always keeping my body moving, shooting my bow, tinkering with gear, but really my baseline is heavy weights. That's my baseline in the off season, if you will. It's trying to hit, literally top of the head to the bottom of my feet, like full scale workouts that give me this base of strength and give me this base of aerobic ability to kind of like as a launching pad, and then coupling that with doing that stupid Rogue Echo bike, doing intervals on a bike and weighted jump ropes and smashing out trails on my fat tire bike and snowshoeing, like all this stuff that kind of culminates into moving your body naturally. The mental aspect is a little bit trickier to kind of nail down, right? It's a little bit trickier to kind of put your finger on the pulse, and that's a little bit more, for me, it's just a natural immersion into being present. It's a natural immersion into, I want to be in the wilderness, rain or shine, severe wind or not. Like, these are the places that I want to go, and these are the things that I want to do. So I'm wrapping my head around being there for 10 days, 14 days, 20 days, whatever. It's just kind of, like you said, a lot of people are, we're so linked to our phones. I don't care who you are. Like, this thing's always within grabbing it. And it's so poisonous. It's the worst information. It's the worst communication. It's the worst everything. I saw, you look at people's profiles of whatever social media profile they're using, and I don't care if it's me, I don't care if it's you, I don't care if it's Tom Brady. It's total bullshit. Am I the person that I portray in Instagram? 100%. Do I do those things to the absolute involvement and intrinsic value of engaging in the wilderness and wildlife and writing the things that I write? Absolutely. 100% me, 100% me diving into my psyche and being as present as I can to share with people. But do I do that every day? No. I just got done washing dishes before I talked to you and walking my dogs around, the cabin, and I just got done shooting my recurve and so not everything is like that, but the mental state is really, it's way more difficult and way more powerful than the physical state. Like I've hunted and hiked with pretty chubby guys, guys that had a pretty robust extra pounds, yeah. and they hiked with gusto. Like, they were just absolutely fixated on getting to the next mountain, fixated on getting to the top, fixated on crossing the river. And it was awesome. And then I've hunted with guys that looked like literal Greek gods. I mean, shredded beasts that were so whiny and so weak and so fixated on the comforts and being catered to in life that I literally wanted to arrow them within an hour. If it was legal, if somebody said, yeah, if that guy's really, like, we can eat him, I just stick an arrow in him, let's eat him, and let's call it a day. And yeah, that's horrible to say, but 100% how. So it's, the mental thing is tough to work on, but really it's accepting where you are, accepting what you want to do. And then, like, a good friend of mine, and I worked on this project with him, Michael Easter. He's a writer for Men's Health magazine, and he's a professor at UNLV in Las Vegas. And he's coming out with a book. It's going to hit shelves in a couple of weeks. It's called The Comfort Crisis. And he went and spent 8 weeks with me in Alaska because he had never hunted in his life. He flew out with Brian. We went and killed his first animal he's ever killed, was a caribou with Brian. He killed a stunning bull with Brian. He was very upset about it. Definitely took a lot of his energy to kind of pull the trigger and walk up to this bull and see it laying on the ground with its eyes closed, basically looked like it was sleeping. Like, it was very difficult for him, all the way to us breaking it down and turning it into what he said, oh, now it looks like meat, to, going through all the different scenarios. He hunted Dall sheep with us in the Chugach Mountains in October, a brutal hunt. He hunted brown bears with us on the Alaska Peninsula, caribou, out of Kotzebue, and he just kind of ran the gamut. And so he wrote this book called The Comfort Crisis, and literally basically lines out how our health and fitness, our health and wellness is directly tied to the difficulties that we experience in life, the difficult places that we put ourselves in, the places where we're cold, where we're wet, where we're scared. When we are in those conditions, we are invigorating ourselves, right? We are attacking our immune systems to kind of come forth in our mental states of being strong and happy. And as difficult as it gets, the happier and stronger we get, and so like we're in the world now that's really, I mean, our world right now is so messed up. We are so weak right now. Like, the things that, if I don't watch the news, but if you watch the 5 o'clock news, the political landscape, this woke culture, the sensitivities that everyone's feeling towards each other in life, racial issues, sex issues, all of these different kind of hot topics right now make me want to vomit. Because if you give any one of these people a sword, and I have a sword and you have a sword, and we have to go get our food, or I have a bow and an arrow and you have a bow and an arrow, and we have to go get our food, or we have to engage in war against each other because there's only enough food for one of us, now we've got something to talk about. Everything else that you think you've got something to talk about, keep it to yourself, because none of us want to hear it. Like, we were designed to be warriors. And warriors are exactly what we've not become. And so it's the mental state, while difficult to kind of put to stamp your hand on, to kind of wrap your mind around, is when you get there, when you own that, when it's yours, when you're standing there in the pouring rain and you are enjoying it as much as the dry day that you're experiencing, when you're welcoming all of that stuff into your experience, and you still have a smile on your face, and you're still ready to go the next 10 miles. Well, you're winning. Yeah. 100%.
That was a really good way of being able to explain that. And, and I think, so I'd be interested to hear what you think on this, but I've read like different things where people say, mental toughness is something that's born, and then, others that think that it can be gained, and or you can earn it, I guess maybe is a better term for it. But I believe that you can definitely get mentally stronger by doing these types of things.
100%.
Like I look back on even going on my first hunt, and I thought I was the toughest badass that there was. Not really. I'm not that conceited, but I felt like I was in a good place, and I realized I was weak when it came to doing these things. And as I evolved and got through it, I was bitching about little things, and we were hiking and stuff, and I was just like, you almost had to come to grips with yourself and be like, knock it the hell off. This isn't a big deal. And what that ended up teaching me is, like, even coming back to my regular work life, the things that I would complain about and get upset about or get mad about, they weren't that big of a deal. Like, they weren't anything. There wasn't anything that was life-changing or whatever. And I've truly loved these types of hunts where it does challenge you like that. And I feel like when I come back, I'm just, you're a better person from that. And I do think for me too is like when I am in better physical conditioning, it can correlate to your mental state from I think the confidence level more than anything. I'm not saying like being shredded or, looking a certain way, but being actually functional and being able to, throughout the summer, doing things that will put you in a tough place. Say even like for me here in the Appalachian Mountains, going on a weekend long backpacking trip where you're just pushing yourself and trying to do things and put yourself in those uncomfortable positions. And I couldn't agree more with what you said about society. And it's my brother actually deleted all of his social media and was just like, I can't. He's like, I just can't do it anymore. He's like, I'll take
he's happier because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He definitely is. Yeah. He's living in Montana, making guns for a living, and just.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's a gunsmith and moved from. Well, he was in the military and moved from Pennsylvania to Colorado, and then didn't like as many people that were in Colorado, and found this small town in Montana and started making rifles and stocks and just enjoying life and doing the simple things. And he told me that not that long ago, he's like, I don't miss social media and the news and everything else. It's there's one thing to be educated on things that are going on, but in my thought process is my own happiness and things that come from it is more important than knowing who's upset over something.
Yeah, your brother's definitely has it figured out. I mean, in all honesty, there's so much more for you that lives within your own ears and your own experiences than you could ever find from someone else. Like if you're looking for, if you're going to someone else for inspiration, if you're going to someone else to kind of look at their experiences and maybe just to be a voyeur, to watch from afar and to say, oh, what's Donnie Vincent up to this week? Like, what's he doing? What kind of crazy things he's up to? Well, then that's not what I would want anyone to ever look at my social media for or to watch our films for. By and large, how I see it is how I want it to be is all enveloped around storytelling, all enveloped around inspiration of, well, I think I can go, I'm a little bit overweight and I don't have a ton of money, but I think I can go on a caribou hunt, or I think I can go out west on an elk hunt, or you know what, instead of hunting from my house this weekend, I think I'm going to go set up a tent on my hunting lease, or I'm going to go set up a tent on my dad's farm or my friend's farm. And we're going to have a little bit of a bonfire, and we're going to cook our food over the fire. We're going to bring a little backpacking stove, and we'll have our little stove in our teepee or whatever it is that we're going to do. But I want to sleep in a sleeping bag, and I want to get up in the morning and have it be chilly and put my long underwear on and get dressed up and grab my bow and put my boots on and head off into the woods. And, and then that night when we come back and let's say we're successful, well, now we have a big doe or a big buck hanging on the meat pole, and you can see her brown fur there, and you can kind of see her being lit up by the embers of the fire. And you did it. You're sitting here and there's your tent and you have your fire and you have your food. And there you have this big, beautiful doe who's cooling on the, from the meat pole. And, and you're starting to grow tired from the day, and you can hear, barred owls or great horned owls hooting in the distance. And you, whatever else, you're listening to coyotes howl or whatever, but you kind of, even though your house is 5 miles away or 10 miles away or an hour away, like you've immersed yourself into that particular hunt. And is it easier to wake up in your bed at home where the house is already warm and your hunting gear is already in your truck and you have to just hit your ignition and hop in your truck and go? Yeah, it's easier, but it's a little bit more valuable to you, to your mind, to your body, to wake up where it's cold and to wake up and to listen to the owls and the coyotes as you're falling asleep at night. It's a little bit more difficult and it's a little bit more valuable to you, and you'll ultimately come away with it. You'll come away with a lot more than shortcutting, and it's really important. Like we only have so many days. People always say, live life like you're dying. That's nearly impossible. But man alive, you've got to try. You've really got to try. The clock is ticking, and you've got to, you really gotta kind of harness it, and don't let your mind slip to shortcuts. Even, and this is personal, but don't let your mind fall to shortcuts like drugs, right? Don't try to shortcut yourself to a good time by trying to alter your mental state. Like, get outside, push your body. I don't care if you're a big fat guy or a big fat lady, push your body. I promise you'll be measurably happier to move along and to build your mind and your physicality, and to actually start facing your days like a warrior. I promise you.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that, and it's one of those things that you have to constantly be cognizant of that and be present and make an effort to do that, because it's so easy to slip into creature comforts and things that are going on, and I think that being present and thinking about these things and making an effort at it, you need to, because otherwise, like you said, it's super easy to wake up in your bed and do that versus going out and sleeping in a tent or whatever the situation might be. That's very, very true. Or even, if you wanted to go, as I'm thinking right now, we're getting into the spring here. I love shed hunting and scouting for whitetails and stuff here, and I actually live in the middle of the Pennsylvania elk herd, so the elk are dropping their antlers now and going out and doing things, and it's one, but there are things that require an effort to do and to spend the time doing it or driving to it or whatever, depending on where you're coming from. That I think it's so important to do that at all times of the year, not just if you're doing a hunt in September. That's not your one and only time. You can make things happen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. There's always an opportunity to get outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so Donnie, I do have another question for you, and it's one that when I started the podcast, I asked this question to every one of my guests, and at some point I lost this question as far as asking people, and for you, I think it seems very fitting. And the question is, if you could define adventure for you, how would you define it?
How would I define it?
Yep.
Pretty easily as a state of mind. That's what it is for me. And like some of the things that we've discussed, whether it be turkey hunting on the 10 acres that is attached to your house, or walking across the Arctic Circle, walking across the Brooks Range in the Arctic Circle of Alaska and hiking, 1,000 miles. It all has to do with what's going on between your ears, because you could cross Antarctica and not really ever be present in doing so. And, you can climb Mount Everest. You can do all of these things, whatever it may be that you kind of harness, and depending on where your mind is living during that event, and depending on kind of the why, not why to the world, but your why, I think is really, really what defines adventure to an individual. And for me, that is doing it the right way. For me, it's getting outside, it's camping, it's sharing mornings with friends, great conversation or total silence. It's everything from, all the way down to insects, to watching the ducks, to watching the deer, caribou, moose, just being an observer and immersing myself into a particular area, and ultimately being super mindful and super present. And that's where I find my adventure.
I like it. So what do you see as far as if you could put adventures as a task, or not, maybe task isn't the right word, but what do you have planned, I guess, for this year? What are some adventures you're looking to go on?
Well, I'm anxious to, I'm a sucker for spring turkey hunting and spring bear hunting too, but I don't have I had a spring bear hunt that I was going to go on last year in Canada, which of course got canceled with COVID, and I think I don't think there's gonna allow Americans into Canada as of yet to do that. So that's going to be off the table, but I'm really anxious for spring turkey hunting, and I've been shooting my recurve for months now, and I spent this last weekend with Joel Turner from he has a company called Shot IQ out of Seattle. You know him?
I don't know him personally, but I know of him and have watched a lot of his videos.
Yeah, he's insane. He's remarkable. I think every single person that shoots a rifle, a pistol, a bow, a recurve, everyone should take his course. If you can take it face to face with him, you absolutely should. If you can't, then you need to take it online. But I'm going to basically, for the most part, probably exclusively turkey hunt this year with my recurve. And I'm just really excited about that endeavor. Like, just shooting. I've worked with Tom Clum Sr. out of Rocky Mountain Specialty Gear in Colorado, and Tom helped me beat it into my head of the form of shooting a recurve, right? And then this last weekend I went and worked with Joel, and he gave me even more little nuances to kind of change my body up, to move my body around, and then really worked on my mental game of just like going through that process and pop, going through that process and pop. And like, I could not believe how accurate I was with the recurve, and just literally kind of gap shooting, but also just eyeballing the target. And I tell you all this because it was just like this process of like moving my body. Like, I was feeling, we were shooting for like 10 hours a day, feeling my shoulders getting sore, and just pop, and going through that process and really driving these arrows home. And I love wild turkeys. I love the dance that they do, the display, the fighting, I love chilly mornings. I love hearing them gobble and spit and drum. And I love even the quiet mornings where it seems like there isn't a single turkey in the countryside. And I'm really looking forward to doing that with a recurve. And I'm in a blind. I'll probably start in a blind, but I'd like to migrate out of the blind. The last several years I've bow hunted with no blind, and loved just sitting there with my compound face painted up, kind of in some natural habitat, ghillie suit on, David Smith decoys out front, and seeing that Tom walk past you at like 2 yards, and you're just sitting there like, don't dare move. And he's all puffed up and he's moving towards the decoys, and then when he starts attacking him, just like literally just sitting there and like getting into it, picking your spot and killing that bird. Like, oh my word. And so now like thinking about sitting there with a stick bow, and then just like, and he attacks the decoys and just like coming a full draw and like pulling through, and just, oh man, that's the next thing.
Yeah.
Right. That's the next thing. In addition to, I have a lot of work coming up this spring, but that's the next thing. And then, I have a really cool hunt in Alaska that's coming up. It's going to be really, really hard. It's caribou and moose. It's going to be really hard. It might be so hard that it's going to suck a little bit of the enjoyment out. It'll feel amazing when I'm done, but it's going to be so difficult that it might kind of grind me down a little bit until that I see that end in sight, or until I see a massive caribou or potentially a massive moose. That seems to be a quick, influx of energy and adrenaline. And so I have a hunt there, and then I might do some hunting in Maine this September, and do some East Coast stuff, which I haven't done. I mean, I've never done it, to be honest with you, but I've longed for it since I was a little kid. I used to go up to Maine fly fishing every year, and I have an opportunity. William Altman is my director of photography at Sicmanta, and he lives in Maine, and so there's some opportunities for us to do some work in Maine, and so I mean that takes us up through September. I'm sure, like I said, I might reach out to Brian and see if he'll fly me in this summer and just drop me off in some godforsaken place this summer, just so I can breathe a little bit and maybe cast a fly rod and eat some blueberries and whatever else I can get myself in trouble with.
So with that Alaska hunt, were you saying that the difficulty would be because you're hunting with the recurve, like why it would be so difficult, or was there something else particular with it?
Yeah, it's getting dropped in an area that is. So what I would do is I'd get dropped in an area, and then I would migrate my way to a river and then float down this river to kind of get out. But where I'm getting dropped off and where the river is a pretty good distance. And I have camera gear, rafts, camping gear, hunting gear. And then if I'm successful in killing a caribou, I have to carry the caribou as well. And so I have to get all of this to the river, which is a long, long ways. And then this river is notorious for not having water in it. So if it doesn't have water in it, that's going to be a long way out to, or a long way to, the river will have water in it eventually. But it might be a bit of a trek down a dry riverbed to get to where I'll actually be blowing a raft up and floating.
Yeah, we were just talking about mental game there, mental toughness, and that'll you'll find it there. That's if you get down to the
tricky
dry riverbed.
Well, so I'm gonna give that a go, and we'll see.
Well. And my comment about so when you're saying about hunting Maine and the East Coast, I think just knowing, at least knowing you a little bit and just seeing the stuff that you do, I think you'll really enjoy the Appalachian Mountains. I mean, that's my home, and I am super passionate about that area because, like, I just think it doesn't get the attention as the Rocky Mountain. You don't got these, giant views as far as being able to see for miles or anything because it's thicker country and stuff, but it's got its own just wildness to it that's incredible. And there's so many black bears and turkeys and deer and in some areas rattlesnakes and different things that are just like, I don't know. I love the Appalachian Mountains, so I'll be interested to hear how your experience goes there.
So much charm, right? So much, you have these big rolling mountains, but like you said, it's, there's tall trees on them. It's really thick and stunning. And then you have all these little farms that are kind of splashed throughout the Appalachians, right? And so it's stunning, beautiful.
Yeah. So, well, good luck on all those adventures you have there. And again, Donnie, thank you so much for coming on. And would you want to tell everyone where they can find, everything that you're doing as far as from the media standpoint?
Sure. Unfortunately, you can find me on Instagram on Donnie_Vincent, and it's Facebook too. You can find me on Facebook, and then DonnieVincent.com is where we sell our films, and we have a lot of cool stuff that's coming up this year. That, like I said, that Australia piece, and we might start releasing a lot more content for free. Long shorts, things like that, just to kind of, we just want people to really enjoy our content. And some of it is getting so old that, we haven't even released, like, our first thing we ever filmed was a Dulce pond in Tok, Alaska in 2011. And the hunt was brutal. It was in blizzards, and we arrowed a really big ram, and it was super hard, and, hiked 30 plus miles on our last day, and all my toenails fell off that day, and we've never even showed anyone the hunt, and it's and while it's not filmed as beautifully as we filmed our stuff as of late, It's very, very good. Like it definitely, it'll have your attention, but we have a lot of work to kind of bring to light. So, and our films are being found in a lot different places now. I'd love to give you a list right now, but I have no idea where they're all,
but
they all live right now.
I'm sure if you go to your website, you can find some more information there. And I heard you say something about Amazon Prime and stuff now. The Rivers Divide is on there. Maybe I'm missing things, but I remember seeing that recently. So
yeah, and I think there's a new app or new to us called Waypoint TV. We might start doing some work with those guys. I think that's on Roku.
Okay.
So yeah, but we have no intentions of stopping anytime soon. And then, we have some other company projects and stuff that we're working on, but we have a lot of really cool work coming out.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And again, Donnie, thank you so much for coming on and taking some time out of your evening here.
Anytime you want.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.